In recent years, there has been a growing concern about hate crimes in the United States. A hate crime is a bias-motivated criminal act in which the perpetrator targets a victim or multiple victims due to their real or perceived inclusion in a racial demographic, sexual orientation, gender, or social group, such as a religion. A hate crime can range from verbal harassment to murder. Differing nations and jurisdictions define hate speech differently, including its legal limits. Different nations and jurisdictions also assign different classifications to hate crimes and similar crimes with a separate motivation. A hate crime is not any crime that happens between two people of differing ethnicity, differing sexual orientation, etc. A hate crime is a crime that is motivated because of differing ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc. In general, a criminal act is only labeled a hate crime if the motivation is clear, only if it is obvious that the crime would not have occurred if this bias had not been present. The data collected in the past few years should be a tool to help combat this, to help understand this, to allocate resources. The data should also be presented as a warning. Statistics about this escalation should be helpful to those who need a rundown of what is going on. Unfortunately, the data is incomplete. Every year, law enforcement agencies across the United States are asked to send their statistics on hate crimes to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but this is a request and not a legal mandate. In 1990, Congress passed the Hate Crime Statistics Act, which established both the practice and the voluntary nature of the practice. There are 18,812 law enforcement agencies in the United States, but in 2021, only 11,883 chose to participate in sending hate crimes statistics. That means about 63% participated and about 37% refused. These refusals are not just coming from small jurisdictions with limited resources. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami are among the cities that sent zero hate crime statistics in 2021. This affects the total numbers, of course, but it also skews the data on per capita hate crimes, or likelihood of a hate crime. Major metropolitan areas often have large ethnic minority populations. The LGBTQ community often congregates there as well, forming their own neighborhoods for their own protection. These specific demographics, combined with the enormity of the population overall, create a potential for a large number of hate crimes, yet the NYPD, LAPD, and many others refuse to report them. According to Cynthia Miller-Idris of Lawfare, the FBI hate crime website repeatedly uses phrases that describe the data as hate crime statistics for the nation, which implies that the data represent the problem at a national level despite the omission of some of the most populous areas in the country. This exacerbates existing problems with hate crime statistics in ways that have tremendous policy and resource implications. So, what happened? For one, in 2021, the FBI transitioned to a new database called the National Incident-Based Reporting System. Local law enforcement may have had trouble transitioning and using the new system. However, the Department of Justice provided over $100 million in grants to police departments to make the transition. And despite what you might hear on Fox News, police departments in major cities have major funding and resources. It should not have been this difficult to make this transition if these police departments had made this a priority. The new system probably contributed to lower reporting than usual, but police departments have always underreported hate crimes. According to the FBI, in 2011, about 20% of police departments refused to participate in the hate crime statistics program. In 2012, about 29% refused. This reduced to about 18% and 16% refusals in the next 2 years, but jumped back up to 19% the year after. That's a lot of missing data. It's important to note that even among police departments that participated, many suspiciously reported zero hate crimes. So these numbers are almost certainly incomplete even among those departments that participated. In other words, 2021's reporting was worse than usual, but it cannot be blamed entirely on a transition to a new reporting system, because some variation of this happens every year. The police always do this. So, what is a more accurate picture of hate crimes in the United States? Depends on who you ask. The Department of Justice uses different methodology. The DOJ reports that violent hate crimes alone affect 1 in 1,000 individuals, which is more than 30 times what the police-reported FBI data says. Independent organizations that track hate crimes also show much higher rates. The FBI data, which is collected through police departments, is a statistical outlier. The police are purposefully underreporting hate crimes in their cities. But why? What are they hiding? What goal does this serve? Despite hate crimes being unambiguously harmful, there has always been a pushback on classifying these crimes differently than crimes without a bias motivation. This pushback is part of a larger right-wing perspective on bigotries. The right-wing perspective is that while such biases might exist, they are merely individual failings that form apropos of nothing or precious little, and that such biases are not the product of society, nor are they enforced by society. The right-wing perspective refuses to acknowledge the greater context of bias, because such an acknowledgement would lead to perceiving the hierarchy as social, which it is, instead of how they wish to perceive it, natural, God-given, and therefore without fault. Thus, a natural hierarchy to them is no hierarchy at all, and does not interfere with equality. To the right wing, this hierarchy is equality. The mere categorization of some crimes as hate crimes is a violation of the social hierarchy that they perceive as the true equality. Whether or not this categorization is helpful or harmful is irrelevant. What matters is that its existence is offensive to the right wing, because this categorization correctly shines a light on this social hierarchy. When the subject of hate crimes is broached, right-wingers and those who unwittingly repeat their talking points respond with, "You know, all crimes are hate crimes." If this sounds familiar, it should, because the same rhetorical trick is used whenever a social hierarchy is brought up. If a protester, upset that black lives are seemingly given less importance in a white majority nation, says Black Lives Matter, right-wingers say all lives matter. The function of replying all lives matter after Black Lives Matter is the same as replying all crimes are hate crimes after bringing up the subject of such bias-motivated crimes. The function is to claim that both police brutality against black people and all bias-motivated crimes are unremarkable, do not require any special attention, and are not carried out in greater frequency. When looking at frequency, likelihood, and per capita occurrences, the numbers actually do suggest that police brutality and police harassment happen more often against racial minority demographics than the racial majority. White people have more occurrences in total numbers, but this is due to having a far greater population. Total numbers are not per capita. Still, the phrase, all crimes are hate crimes, persists. Let's look at that. First, no, not all crimes are about hate, or anger, or any other loosely connected synonyms. Many crimes are the product of desperation, or poverty. A lack of resources is more likely to produce crime than almost any other factor. Even many violent crimes can be connected to poverty, such as an assault or death during an armed robbery, or an assault or death in the course of selling controlled substances. Some crimes are even accidental, or through negligence. Not all crimes are hate crimes, or crimes of passion. Hate crimes is just a way of saying bias-motivated crimes. You can't just look at the word hate in hate crimes and say, well, you know, criminals are angry sometimes, and that's not relevant. Hate crimes just means bias-motivated crimes. The classification of an incident as a hate crime and incurring a different penalty is not that remarkable. Motive has always been relevant in the classification of a crime. It is the difference between a crime being premeditated or not, or a crime being committed through negligence or forethought, or a crime that began as a barroom fistfight but escalated fatally, and an assassination. Petty theft is not the same as grand larceny. There are degrees to crime that often depend upon motive and circumstance. This has always been true. A crime in which the perpetrator targets an individual largely for their inclusion in a specific demographic holds a different weight than a crime in which the perpetrator did this in a sudden fit of anger or through negligence. The motive tells us a lot about intent, maybe about premeditation. Furthermore, a hate crime can have a completely different and far worse effect on the victim than a similar crime with a different motive. Let's say a man belonging to an ethnic minority is assaulted outside of a local bar by two men. Earlier that evening, they had an argument that was inflamed by alcohol. Maybe it was about money or something else trivial. That is still damaging, of course. Now let's say the same man had been assaulted by two racists, shouting slurs, and committing this act to threaten the man, to tell him that he does not belong in this neighborhood. That act is psychologically damaging on a completely different level. The two men are not simply engaging in an assault. They are engaging in a lifetime threat to this man, a threat to keep him on his toes for the remainder of his life. A border has been drawn in the man's mind, forever. Motive matters. A hate crime performed in public or discovered through the media or word of mouth carries a terroristic element. A demographic, usually a marginalized group, has been threatened throughout the community by this crime. A crime's motives and circumstances changes its complexity, as does the amount of victims. If someone discharges a firearm into a crowd of people and is responsible for the deaths of 5 people, the perpetrator is obviously going to be charged with all 5 deaths. The amount of victims matters. A hate crime is often designed to threaten a community. In other words, a hate crime often contains significantly more victims than an individual assault or an individual threat, because targeting a demographic carries a threat to more people within that demographic. Motive always matters. Severity always matters. Scale always matters. If one opposes a crime being categorized as a hate crime, but does not oppose the myriad of other ways crimes are categorized based on motive, severity, and scale, we must question why this specific opposition exists. The refusal to acknowledge hate crimes and the refusal to report hate crimes are symptoms of this opposition. Worst of all, the police cannot be trusted to protect communities from hate crimes because the police themselves are committing hate crimes on a regular basis and getting away with it. For example, when the NYPD proposed a new task force allegedly to combat hate crimes against Asian Americans in the wake of the COVID pandemic, Asian American New Yorkers were not enthusiastic. According to reporting by Kimmy Yan of NBC News, critics said that not everyone in the Asian American community has the same relationship with law enforcement, and that some communities don't feel that they can rely on police to protect them. Refugees who arrived after the Vietnam War often resettled in urban centers with little funding and infrastructure, many of which were under heavy surveillance as well. Activists warn that such a task force could place Asian Americans in the difficult position of relying on an institution that has historically criminalized Black and brown communities. Analysis found that the probability of being shot by police while being Black and unarmed is about 3.5 times the chance of unarmed white people, revealing significant bias. So, if the police data is purposefully incomplete and the FBI data only calculates hate crimes through the police data, what are the real statistics for hate crimes for the past few years? Independent, non-state analysis and academic studies tell us the full story. In addition to several high-profile incidents and mass shootings, there has been a significant uptick in several demographics. First, transphobic violence has skyrocketed, and we know this because independent organizations such as the Human Rights Campaign has kept a lookout on the actual statistics. Second, anti-Asian violence has increased dramatically, as independent analysis also shows. Third, anti-Semitic violence and hate speech has increased, according to non-state analysis. Fourth, there has been an upsurge in membership in one of the nation's most populous hate groups, the Proud Boys. Hate speech in general is on the rise, propagated by well-known public figures and popularized on social media. There are even fewer safeguards on social media now than there were just a few months ago. Whether this hate speech is criminal or not is irrelevant because hate speech has been proven to be an element in causing hate crimes. It's called stochastic terrorism, a process in which dehumanizing speech leads to devaluing marginalized demographics, which leads to violence. These are the statistics, and they might be inconvenient to people who want to believe that everyone is treated fairly and that marginalized people are just complaining, but the numbers are the numbers, and the studies are the studies. Overall, we are existing within a reactionary movement against egalitarianism. This is the worst possible time to underreport hate crimes. If you haven't heard about these increases in hate crimes, these violent incidents, and stochastic terrorism, and this is all news to you, think about why that is. Hi everybody. If you like what I do, make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so that you never miss an episode. Also, check out my Patreon link. See you soon.